I remember hitting the floor before I even realized what was happening. 1 second, I was typing up a report at my desk, and the next, everything went black. I woke up on the break room couch, dizzy, sweating, with a manager awkwardly standing over me, asking if I needed a minute, or if I could push through. That moment should have been the wake-up call. Instead, it was the beginning of the end. 3 days later, I was fired. Just like that. After everything I had put into the job, after months, no, years of sacrificing sleep, weekends, my mental health, my physical health, they sat me down and told me my performance had declined, and that they were going in a different direction. No warning, no care. Just a scripted HR monologue and a final email locking me out of my company account. What hurts the most isn't even the firing itself. It's the fact that they made it seem like it was my fault, that I somehow deserved it. That collapsing from exhaustion was an inconvenience for them instead of a red flag about their management. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't suggest taking time off. They didn't offer support. They handed me a termination letter and a vague promise to keep me in mind for future opportunities. For a long time I kept thinking, was I the problem? But no, I wasn't lazy. I wasn't underperforming. I was burning myself out trying to meet impossible expectations. And the company I gave everything to? They used me until there was nothing left and tossed me aside like trash. That's why I'm telling this story. Because maybe someone else is out there, right now, running themselves into the ground to meet a deadline for a boss who doesn't even know their last name. And maybe hearing what happened to me will make them stop and ask, is this worth it? So, here's what really went down from the moment I started that job with stars in my eyes to the day I realized I was just another disposable name on a spreadsheet. When I first got the job, I was ecstatic. It felt like everything I had worked for was finally paying off. A position at a growing company, a decent salary, opportunities to grow with the business. I mean, it all sounded perfect. I remember calling my mom right after I got the offer letter, practically bouncing with excitement. I even bought a new blazer for my first day, the kind that makes you feel like you actually have your life together. And at first, it really did seem like the dream. The office had free coffee, friendly coworkers, even a foosball table in the break room that no one actually used, but still felt like a cool touch. Everyone smiled, and the onboarding manager told me I was exactly the kind of go-getter they needed. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. The job description said 9 to 5, but my inbox was flooded well past midnight. Tasks I wasn't trained for landed on my desk with a, "Can you just take care of this real quick?" And if I asked questions, I was met with tight smiles or subtle jabs like, "We need people who can hit the ground running." Meetings ran over, deadlines were insane, and suddenly that friendly team vibe turned into silent Slack messages and passive-aggressive comments about ownership and initiative. I told myself it was just the learning curve, that every new job is stressful at first, but then the goalposts started moving. I'd finish one big project only to be told it wasn't quite what leadership had envisioned, despite no one actually telling me what that vision was in the first place. The praise disappeared. Feedback, when it came, was vague and loaded with buzzwords that didn't actually mean anything. Synergize better. Push the envelope. Whatever that was supposed to mean. Still, I hung on. I worked late. I skipped lunch. I told myself that if I just pushed harder, proved myself more, they'd see how dedicated I was. That the chaos would calm down. That it would all be worth it. I didn't realize then that I was already slipping into burnout and that this so-called dream job was slowly turning into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My boss, let's call him Mark, was the kind of guy who knew how to work a room. Tall, sharp-dressed, always smiling like he knew something you didn't. On my first day, he shook my hand with both of his, looked me in the eye, and told me how lucky they were to have me. He talked about how he valued creativity, autonomy, and building a team where everyone felt empowered. I actually believed him. I thought, this is someone I can learn from. But that version of Mark didn't last long. Slowly, the mask started slipping. At first, it was little things. A snide comment when I made a typo in a presentation. Are you always this detail? Optional? A sarcastic chuckle during a team call when I asked for clarification. Did you not read the brief? I laughed it off, chalked it up to stress. But the truth was, he never wanted a team. He wanted soldiers. People who followed orders, never pushed back, and always made him look good no matter the cost. Micromanagement became the norm. I'd spend hours on a report, only to have him rewrite it completely, then scold me for not thinking proactively. If I didn't CC him on every email, I'd get a Slack message within minutes. Why am I hearing about this secondhand? But when I did loop him in, he accused me of being too dependent. It was a no-win situation. If I worked independently, I was reckless. If I asked questions, I was incompetent. The more I tried to stay ahead of his expectations, the more he shifted them just out of reach. Worst of all was the guilt tripping. If I logged off before 7 p.m., there'd be a comment the next morning. Nice of you to take a half day. When I mentioned needing a weekend to recharge, he replied, it must be nice to have that kind of flexibility. Everything I did, every boundary I tried to set was twisted into a lack of commitment. He didn't yell or throw things. He didn't need to. He just slowly rewired the way I saw myself until I genuinely believed I wasn't trying hard enough. And that's when the real damage began. It started slowly. An extra task here, a quick favor there. Can you take this on until we hire someone new? You're the only one I trust to do this right. And because I wanted to prove myself, I said yes. Every single time. Before I knew it, I wasn't just doing my job. I was doing 2, maybe 3 people's jobs. And the scary part? No one even blinked. It was just expected. At first, it felt like a compliment. I thought, they must really value me if they keep trusting me with more. But the truth was, they saw I wouldn't say no, and they exploited that. My original role was already intense. But soon I was managing logistics, client relationships, even doing basic IT troubleshooting because you're good with computers, right? I kept waiting for reinforcements, someone to help carry the weight. But no one ever came. Meanwhile, people around me started disappearing. Some quit. Some just mentally checked out. I'd message a coworker only to get an ooh reply that they'd burned through all their PTO and finally cracked. I started noticing the same look in everyone's eye. Exhausted, anxious, hollow. The energy in the office shifted. People spoke in hushed tones. Laughter dried up. Even the foosball table gathered dust, a silent monument to whatever optimism we once had. The worst part was that management knew. They saw the turnover. They knew people were cracking under the pressure. But instead of easing workloads, they just shuffled tasks around like Tetris blocks, hoping no one would notice the gaps. And 2 became their go-to fixer. Can you jump in on this just for today? You're a team player, right? Every ask was positioned as temporary, a one-time thing. But none of it ever went away. It just stacked up, higher and higher, until I couldn't see over it anymore. I stopped sleeping properly, stopped eating full meals. My to-do list never got shorter, just more urgent. There was always some fire, some crisis, some task that couldn't wait. And the irony? The more I gave, the less it seemed to matter. No matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. And I was starting to realize, maybe it never would be. I didn't notice it happening at first. The small things were easy to excuse: missing lunch because I was in the zone, skipping dinner because I was too tired to eat. One weekend, I had to bail on a family gathering, my niece's birthday. I told them I had a deadline, and everyone said they understood, but I could hear the disappointment in my sister's voice. You've missed the last 3, you know. I told myself I'd make it up to them next time. But there was never a next time. There was always another deliverable, Another urgent meeting. Another, we need this done by EOD. Sleep became optional. My nights turned into a blur of stress scrolling, and 3 a.m. alarm clocks. I kept my laptop on my nightstand. My dreams when I had them were filled with spreadsheets and red flags I ignored in waking life. I ate at my desk, usually whatever I could microwave in 2 minutes. I couldn't remember the last time I sat down for a real meal, let alone one that wasn't eaten with my email tab open. The toll wasn't just physical. I started feeling flat, numb, like I was watching my own life happen from a distance. I'd laugh at a joke and wonder why it felt fake. I'd sit in meetings and hear people talking, but the words didn't land. I went days without talking to anyone outside of work. I isolated myself because even small conversations felt like more effort than I could afford. And the scariest part? I didn't even know how bad it had gotten until I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror one morning and didn't recognize the person staring back. I felt dread every time my phone buzzed. I flinched at emails. I started waking up with this sinking feeling in my chest, like I was already behind before I even got out of bed. It was a slow erosion, one sacrifice after another, until there was almost nothing left of the person who had started that job with so much hope, just a shell with a smile, trying to survive another week without falling apart completely. The body keeps score even when your brain tries to pretend everything's fine. It started with headaches, sharp, pulsing ones that made me squint at the screen like I'd been staring into the sun. Then came the fatigue, not the kind that a nap could fix, but the kind that weighed on me like soaked clothes. Every task felt heavier. Every day felt longer. I began having anxiety attacks, these sudden waves of panic that made it feel like I couldn't breathe, like my chest was closing in. The first time it happened, I thought I was having a heart attack. I sat in the office bathroom, locked in a stall, counting to 10, over and over, just to feel normal again. I finally worked up the courage to say something. I pulled Mark aside and told him I was struggling, that I wasn't sleeping, that I felt constantly overwhelmed. He barely looked up from his phone. "We're all tired," he said. "You just need to toughen up. Find your rhythm." He made it sound like I was weak for not keeping up, like I was the only one who couldn't hack it. And just like that, I stopped talking about it. I put the mask back on, smiled, nodded, kept pushing. I thought maybe HR would be different. I sent a carefully worded email, nothing dramatic, just asking about wellness resources, maybe flexible hours. They replied with a link to the employee handbook and a reminder that personal challenges should not impact team deliverables. That was it. No follow-up, no check-in, just corporate wallpaper pasted over a bleeding wound. I started keeping aspirin in my desk drawer. I stopped wearing nice clothes. What was the point? I dragged myself through each day in autopilot. It was like I was underwater, and everyone else was breathing fine. I watched my coworkers drop like flies, burnout, stress leave, some just ghosted completely. And I wondered, how much longer can I keep going like this? But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because somehow, even in that chaos, I still believed the lie that maybe if I held on just a little longer, things would get better. They didn't. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I had barely slept the night before, maybe 2 hours. Tops. I'd been up redoing a presentation that Mark had suddenly decided needed a more strategic edge. Whatever that meant. I got to the office early, stomach churning, my heart already racing before I even sat down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee, but I told myself I'd just get through the day, power through, like always. The morning was a blur of meetings, emails, and more last-minute demands. Mark wanted revisions. A client call got moved up. My coworker, the only one who halfway understood the new system we were using, was out sick. I felt like I was running on fumes. Then, right in the middle of updating a spreadsheet, the screen started to blur. My vision tunneled. The room tilted. I remember standing up to go get water, thinking maybe I just needed a second. And then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor. A few coworkers hovered nearby. One of them looked terrified. Someone had called the on-site nurse. There was talk of calling an ambulance. My ears were ringing. I couldn't focus on what anyone was saying. I felt like I was floating outside my own body. Eventually, someone helped me into the break room. I sat on the couch, still dizzy, while someone shoved a bottle of water into my hands. Mark didn't come check on me. Not once. He sent another manager to ask if I could finish the client brief later that day. Only if you're up to it. I actually laughed out loud because it was so absurd. I had just passed out at my desk, and they still wanted deliverables. Eventually, someone convinced me to go home. No doctor. No hospital. Just take the afternoon and rest. So I did. I went home, crawled into bed fully dressed, and slept for 13 hours straight. But the scariest part? I wasn't even surprised it happened. Deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time. The next day, I stayed home. Not because anyone told me to, but because I physically couldn't move. My body felt like it had been hit by a truck. Muscles sore, head pounding, nerves completely fried. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from Mark, or at the very least, HR. Nothing. No call, no text, not even a courtesy email. Just silence, like I'd evaporated. I told myself maybe they were giving me space. Maybe they were planning to check in later. But that check-in never came. The hours turned into a day, then two. And the longer I waited, the more that silence started to feel intentional. Like they were just waiting to see what I would do. On day 3, I finally got an email. Not from Mark, but from someone in admin. It said there would be a brief check-in meeting scheduled for the next morning. No context, no warmth. Just a calendar invite and a Zoom link. I showed up to the call, still groggy, hoping for something anything remotely human. Instead, Mark greeted me with his usual cool detachment. "We've been reviewing your performance over the past few weeks," he began. Like I hadn't literally collapsed from exhaustion 3 days prior. "There have been concerns about your ability to maintain focus and meet expectations." I stared at him, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Was he serious? He brought up vague complaints. Missed deadline zones I'd met. Lack of communication despite my inbox being a digital graveyard of late-night replies. He never mentioned the collapse. Never asked if I was okay. The entire call was framed like I was the problem. Like I was the disruption. By the time the meeting ended, it was clear where it was heading. "We'll be following up with next steps," he said. And just like that, the call ended. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, trying to process it. I wasn't just exhausted anymore, I was furious. Not because they were letting me go, but because they were pretending like it was justified. Like burning out wasn't a symptom of the environment they created but a personal failing on my part. I gave them everything, and they gave me nothing back. The follow-up meeting was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. I barely slept the night before. I knew what was coming. But a small, stupid part of me still held out hope. Hope that maybe someone had realized how far things had gone, how wrong this all was. That someone, somewhere, still had a shred of decency left. I logged into the Zoom call 2 minutes early. Mark was already there, along with someone from HR I'd never seen before. They didn't waste time. "We've made the decision to end your employment, effective immediately." No preamble. No acknowledgement of the collapse. Just straight into it. Like I was a defective part. They were quietly removing from the assembly line. Mark kept his face neutral. Professional. Like this was just another task on his calendar. The HR rep read from a script literally read. "Due to consistent underperformance, a pattern of disengagement, and concerns regarding reliability, the company has decided to move forward without your continued involvement." Disengagement? Reliability? I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I wanted to scream, to ask them how many weekends I'd given up, how many nights I'd cried silently at my laptop, working through migraines and panic attacks to meet their impossible deadlines. But I didn't say anything. I just sat there, stunned, as they laid out the logistics final paycheck, email access revoked, return of company property. Cold, sterile language meant to keep things clean and distant. Mark thanked me for my contributions and said he wished me well in future endeavors. It was the kind of line you copy-paste when you don't actually care what happens next. The whole thing was over in less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes to erase 2 years of my life. 10 minutes to redefine my burnout as failure, my pain as a performance issue. The screen went dark. I was unemployed. Just like that. At first, I just sat there, staring at the blank screen. No tears, no words, just a dull, heavy silence pressing down on me. My apartment felt too quiet, like the whole world had shifted just a few inches off center. I kept replaying the meeting in my head, trying to figure out what I could have said or done differently. But the truth was, they had made up their minds long before I even logged in. Then the shock gave way to something worse, a shame. This deep, gnawing feeling that maybe it really was my fault. That maybe I wasn't strong enough, fast enough, smart enough. I avoided telling anyone at first. I didn't want to see the look of pity in their eyes, or hear the inevitable, "Have you started applying to other jobs yet?" I couldn't even open LinkedIn. The thought of writing some chipper, "On to the next adventure," post made me want to throw my laptop out the window. And then came the financial panic. Rent was due in 2 weeks. My savings weren't exactly thriving. Most of it had gone to paying off the therapy I could barely afford while working. I started making lists of bills to delay, expenses to cut. Grocery shopping became a math problem. Every purchase felt like a threat. The freedom people talk about after quitting a toxic job? I didn't feel it. All I felt was fear. The worst part was the stillness. When you're constantly overworked, there's no time to think, no time to feel. But now, I had all the time in the world, and it hit me just how much I had given up. My health, my joy, my relationships, all for a job that left me behind without a second thought. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just existed. I kept wondering, what do I do now? Who am I without this job? I didn't have answers. Not yet. All I had was the silence and the slow, painful realization that it wasn't just about losing a job. It was about losing myself in the process. I didn't tell anyone for a few days. I just couldn't say the words out loud. I got fired. It felt like admitting defeat, like confirming every fear I'd internalized, but silence only made it worse. So eventually, I cracked and texted a few close friends. Just a simple, "Hey, I lost my job. Not sure what's next." What happened after that completely caught me off guard. Within minutes, my phone lit up with messages, calls, voice notes, not with pity or empty platitudes, but with real concern, real love. One friend immediately offered to help with rent if things got tight. Another sent a list of mental health resources. My sister drove an hour just to show up with groceries and sit on the couch with me while I cried into a bowl of soup. No judgment. Just quiet, steady presence. Even people I hadn't talked to in years reached out after I posted something vague online about career transitions. Messages poured in from people who had also burned out, who had also collapsed under the weight of impossible expectations. It was like I had accidentally joined a club. No one talks about one full of talented, hard-working people who were made to feel like failures for being human. And slowly, something inside me started to shift. For the first time in months, I felt seen, understood. Not as some broken employee who couldn't keep up, but as a person who had tried, who had given everything, and maybe too much. With each conversation, each message, I started reclaiming pieces of myself. I started remembering who I was before I started measuring my worth by unread emails and calendar invites. No, The pain didn't disappear overnight, but for the first time, I wasn't carrying it alone, and that made all the difference. A friend, someone I hadn't even known was a lawyer, reached out after hearing what happened. She offered to hop on a call, just to talk through the situation. I didn't expect much. I wasn't thinking lawsuit. I just needed someone who understood the system better than I did. We talked for over an hour. I walked her through everything collapsing at work, the termination call, the vague accusations of underperformance. She listened quietly, then said something that stopped me cold. "This might not just be unethical," she said. "It could actually be illegal." That sentence echoed in my head for days. I'd never thought of it that way. I'd been so wrapped up in the emotional fallout, the guilt and shame, that I hadn't even considered whether my rights had been violated. She explained things I'd never been told about workplace protections, about reasonable accommodations, about how a sudden termination after a medical incident might raise serious red flags. She even recommended I speak to an employment rights nonprofit. I did, and hearing them back up what she'd said, it blew my mind. They didn't promise justice or some big courtroom moment, but they did make something incredibly clear. I had been mistreated. Not because I was bad at my job, not because I couldn't keep up, but because I was a human being in a system that values output over well-being. And once I stopped producing at a superhuman level, I was discarded. I started reading about burnout, actual, medical burnout, not the watered-down version we joke about online. And it hit me just how deep I'd gone. I had all the symptoms: chronic fatigue, detachment, cognitive dysfunction. But instead of being offered help, I was punished for it. That realization made me angry, but in a good way. For the first time, I wasn't blaming myself. I was blaming the system that allowed it to happen. I wasn't ready to take legal action. Maybe I never would be. But I was done staying quiet. And that shift, from shame to understanding, from isolation to awareness, was the first real step toward healing. For the first time in years, I didn't set an alarm. I let my body wake up when it was ready. No Slack pings, no deadlines. Just silence, sunlight, and a slow cup of coffee I actually had time to finish. It was strange at first, even disorienting. My brain kept trying to fill the space with tasks and urgency. But day by day, I let that noise fade. I didn't jump into job hunting right away. I gave myself permission to pause, to feel everything I'd been pushing down for so long: the grief, the anger, the sheer exhaustion. I journaled. I walked without headphones. I saw a therapist. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't linear, but I needed that space, that time to remember who I was outside of productivity. Eventually, I did start poking around job boards. Slowly, cautiously. But I wasn't the same person who had once said yes to everything. I made a list of red flag zones I'd ignored the first time around. Vague job descriptions? No thanks. Fast-paced environment with flexible hours? Translation: you'll never stop working. Work hard? Play hard? Absolutely not. I also made a list of non-negotiables. Clear boundaries. A real lunch break. A boss who sees me as a human being, not a machine. I realized that while I couldn't always control the system, I could control what I was willing to accept from it. I applied less frequently, but more intentionally. I paid attention to how people spoke in interviews. Did they ask about how I handle pressure, how they support employees who are under it? Did they value time off? Or just tolerate it? The truth is, I'm still figuring things out. But I'm moving forward, one step at a time. And this time, I'm doing it with my eyes wide open. If you're reading this or listening to this and something about it feels familiar, please hear me when I say, you are not weak for being tired. You are not lazy for needing rest. You are not a failure for choosing yourself over a job that demands everything and gives nothing in return. I wish someone had told me that earlier. I wish someone had looked me in the eye and said, Your health matters more than your inbox. Your worth isn't measured in deliverables. So, if you're in a toxic work environment right now, if you're dreading Monday before Sunday even end, please start paying attention. Look for the warning signs. The gut feelings you've been ignoring. The manager who always finds a way to make you feel not quite enough. The company that rewards burnout and calls it hustle. The voice in your head that whispers, maybe it's me, when it's really the system. Take care of yourself. Seriously. Take a real lunch. Use your PTO. Set your Slack to away. And don't feel guilty about it. You don't owe your sanity to a paycheck. And if you're on the other side, if you've already been through it, know that you're not alone. So many of us have walked that same road, quietly carrying the weight of burnout, shame, and silence. But we don't have to carry it forever. What happened to me broke something open, but it also showed me what I will never tolerate again. And if my story can help someone else hit the brakes before they crash, or give them the courage to leave a job that's slowly draining the life out of them, then maybe it's not just a painful chapter. Maybe it's the start of something better for both of us. It's strange looking back now. Not with anger though, I'd be lying if I said I don't still feel flashes of it sometimes, but with clarity. A kind of quiet understanding. I can see the whole picture now. The slow unraveling. The red flags I painted green. The way I kept stretching myself thinner and thinner, thinking if I just worked harder, gave more, everything would fall into place. But now I know the truth. No amount of effort can save you in a system built to break you. And yet, I'm still here. A few months after everything happened, I landed a new job. A smaller company. Different culture. The first thing my new manager said during onboarding was, "We don't glorify burnout here. If you're working past 5 every day, we're doing something wrong." I nearly cried. Not because the job was perfected, still work, still life, but because it felt human. I felt human. I've kept the promises I made to myself. I take breaks, real ones. I set boundaries, and I don't apologize for them. I speak up when something feels off. And if those things aren't respected, I walk away. No second guessing. No guilt. That's not a luxury, it's survival. It's growth. I still have healing to do. Some days, I catch myself slipping back into old habit-checking emails late at night, tying my worth to output. But the difference now is that I notice. I pause. I breathe. I choose differently. And that's what growth really looks like, not some dramatic transformation, but small, intentional acts of self-preservation and self-respect. This story didn't end the way I thought it would. It was painful, messy, and honestly terrifying at times. But it gave me something I never expected. A reset. A second chance. A deeper understanding of who I am and what I'm no longer willing to sacrifice. So yes, I collapsed. Yes, I got fired. But I also got back up. And I'm still writing my story this time. On my own terms. This story was intense. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.